That's nice.
Well, this is just so cool for me because I didn't even know what you did for a living.
Oh, I went to Methodist first when they opened their psych department after Zeller's closed. And I worked there.
We have more in common than I thought. I've been going to school my whole life. I got my doctorate when I was 68. So you started at 48.
48, and I had to take all my prereqs because I'd been out of school so long. So I had to have all the stuff like I had in high school. First, common math and algebra, English, composition, biology 1 and 2, chemistry 1 and 2, statistics, which was stupid because we don't use statistics in nursing.
I hate statistics.
But I love school.
You decide to go back? I love school too, but what made you decide to do that?
I had always been a stay-at-home mom. I tried real estate and I hated that because it's such a lie that they put you through. And then I bartended and waitressed, which I loved, but that didn't pay much, So I decided if I better get me a job, I thought, well, I'll just go to be an RN. And I wanted to do psych, and I just love school. I could have stayed in school forever, Linda. I just love being with those young kids. We had a blast. They couldn't believe my stories from when I was a hippie.
God.
And I love being a bartender. I go back to that in a second.
My favorite job. Child welfare. I was a child protection specialist for 10 years, and it seems so silly because I had to take people's kids away, but I did a lot of other cool stuff too. But my favorite job next to that was bartending. I'm like you, I'd go back and do it right now if somebody let me.
Oh, I know, because I like to visit and I like to listen to people's stories and their lives and stuff.
Yes.
Especially old people. I just love to hear how they grew up. And
I do too. I used to work in a nursing home for a while and had a little group coffee talk, we called it.
Yeah.
And I've had these 5 or 6 old ladies come in and just talk about their youth and what it felt like. And now I'd be in the damn group if they were having a group now, I'd be old enough.
I'm like, I'm not 73.
Jesus. I can't even hardly say the numbers anymore. And Carl gets to be 2 years younger than me from August to January. He'll be like, he was 73 when I turned 75, and I can't handle it. I'm always like, no, you're not.
But you don't feel it. You don't act.
You went and got your nursing degree. Then what? Then what did you do?
I went. They had a hard time placing me because Zeller's was closing. So when I found out that Methodist was going to pick it up, and St. Francis being a trauma center, they didn't want nothing to do with psych anymore. So Methodist stepped up and decided they just used the 4 old floors of the old building that faced the highway to do all the psych. So we had a kids unit on 4, I think it was, on that area. They had a school, and the kids were there for 9 months, like a school would be, and they had them from 4 to 18. They had a 4-year-old schizophrenic girl from down in the bowels of Peoria, which it was too bad. But they always have to turn them out in the summer and send them back to their parents, which, then you have to work with them all over again when they come back in August.
So you worked on the kids unit?
No, I didn't want that. I have a hard time. I didn't want to ever be OB or peds because I cry so bad when it happens to little kids. But old people, I could take that. Or it's like, middle-aged people, I was like, oh, you deserve it, But I love Methodist. I worked on the 6th floor in behavioral health, and that was the long-term commitment. We clean out the kitchen every morning. The regular judge, he would come and have court Monday through Friday for a couple hours, and they would decide based on what the psychiatrist wanted who was going to get committed for another 3 months. So it was kind of like a nursing home for psych patients. And I got to know everybody really well, even though I always work third shift. I like thirds, you get to be the chief, not the Indian. And I like that because I'm bossy as hell. And
Paul said he thinks we have more in common than we realize.
I like being bossy.
I do too. So
Nobody
what would you do on third shift?
It was like a razor blade when I get mad. But I love Methodist, except after 2 years on third shift, that drive, I was falling asleep all the time. And I had 3 or 4 places I'd stop, pull off for 15 minutes, take a little cat nap, get home. But it was 75 miles one way for me. And I kept thinking, that's 3 hours I could be home or closer to work. Well, I went to McDonough District after 2 years and went to acute care with Teresa Windsor Ham. She's Donnie's first cousin, married to Doug Ham. I don't know if you remember Doug and Rock.
No.
Well, they were a little bit younger than me and Carl, but not too much. They used to have that Dunhutton farm on Route 136 outside of Ipava going to Duncantown. Anyway, that's who she's married to. Anyway, she had been an acute care nurse for years, but not an RN. So she ended up going to Graham our last year together, and since she was Donnie's cousin, we got to be really close, And so she was working in McDonough District, and I thought, well, that 15 minutes is a lot better than an hour and a half on the road. Yes. So I went to acute care, and I was always glad I did because I got all my skills back. You didn't do hardly any really like skill care in nursing in psych. It's all just mental and charting and computers and stuff like that. We did give a lot of shots when they'd come in and act out, but the first shift girls did all the pills. So mine was just more like a caretaker at night and trying to settle them down and talk to them. And then I chart on everything to tell the doctors what they'd say, which I love that, but the drive got too much. Anyway, right about the time I went to acute care in Macomb, they opened up that treatment and detention facility in Rushville for the sexual predators. And I said, well, that's my calling because it's psych. I can work thirds. And plus they paid twice what everybody else did in them days. And it was through a company called Addis at first, which got bought out by Wexford. And Wexford is a huge psychiatric nursing type area out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They've got 30 or 40 places in Florida alone. They do prisons. They do kind of like psychiatric nursing home care, but they bought the contract for the prison down there. And they were really good for the first 10 years. The state left us alone. We got to kind of run it efficiently the way we wanted. But then the state come in there after I'd been there 10 years and said, oh, no, you're doing it all wrong. You're delivering your meds all wrong, blah, blah, blah. So
year would that have been? From when to when?
I worked from 2000. Let's see, 2006. They opened in June of 2006, and I started at the end of July because they needed a full-time third shift nurse by then. First, they had just 100 people come down from Joliet and Sheridan. The thing with this place, there's only 2 in the country, I understand, one here and one in Vermont. They've served most of their time in the criminal capacity in DOC in Illinois, but through some loophole or they didn't take it up on it or something, they didn't get any counseling for being sexual predators. So this place was called TDF DHS, Treatment and Detention Facility run by the Department of DHS in Illinois. It was supposed to be a juvenile facility, and it was built like that, but they couldn't get enough juveniles to come there, so they decided to make it for the people that needed psychiatric treatment for sexual predilections, you know.
Wow.
Which I enjoyed that. In the first several years, Don Sullivan and I did most of the admitting on third shift. They would come down from Chicago in the middle of the night. But see, these people, since they'd already served a lot of time in corrections, thought they were getting out, that it was a halfway facility. So immediately they hated all of us. And it would take up to a week to get them settled down. So we had a lot of what we called special management, where it was just more one-on-one. But also,
were there counselors there on staff too, or just
only on first shift? They were always usually gone by 3 or 4. And we had a lot of them, but see, I never saw hardly any of them. I had on weekends, I would see the chief psychiatrist, and he rode the train down from Chicago. He had a private practice up there. And then Dr. who had several degrees, and he was a psychiatrist plus a medical doctor. He was like the overall doctor, but he really didn't, other than accept people, read their charts, put them in certain groups. He really didn't see anybody. And he was only in his 30s. Here I was 52, you know. He and I clinked whenever we ran into each other, because I thought it was, they just didn't use any common sense with the treatments they did. And also, since they were civilly committed now, they could refuse any kind of treatment. And a lot of them did.
And what would happen? Would they get to go free, or would they have to go back to prison?
They just stayed there.
Oh,
we used
but they didn't have to do the treatment.
No, they didn't have to take meds. They didn't have to do treatment, nothing, unless they acted out. They got to have, which their families had to buy these. They got to have VCRs and mini computers. And of course, it was the days before laptop. They got to have TVs, but they had to be clear plastic in the back, because they tried to hide stuff all the time, you know. Traffic and trading was the big thing.
Wow. But that's true in most facilities.
Yes.
Was it it sounds like to me that would have been kind of experimental. I didn't know Rushville ever had such a place.
It is kind of experimental, which I think I'd say it's, I don't know about now. I've been retired since Donnie got sick and passed away. So 8 years almost. I'd say 90% fail, 10% work. They have what they call a step out program, but they have to have completed all 5 phases of the treatment program, which takes 10 years, 2 years for each step. And a lot of them like them, you know, but if they refuse, then they're just going to stay there for 3 hots and a cot, you know, 3 meals a day, and it's a place to sleep. And they have friends, which they never had before. They might go to group, but a lot of times they don't.
So interesting. So is it still there?
Yeah, oh yeah. And it's a big employer. We have, I would say, when I left, it was 650 people, and that was pretty much capacity. I have to say, though, whoever built that was the main architect for the juveniles. That was a laid out facility that was really nice. They had solar areas in each unit where you could see the sun.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The windows themselves were little, you know, little slits, and the slits everything was steel and gray concrete. And they had doors that had to be rolled by computer from the guards. They call them in the bubble. They sit up above so they could see all 3 units. So like they had Alpha, Baker, Charlie, you know, whatever. But Alpha, and all the units were about the same. They had 18 bed units in each area, and each letter of the alphabet had 3 units. And then some of them, at first we only had 100 people, and then they gradually build up over the years to the 650. So it was full.
That is a lot of dialysis
unit too, because when Dawn and I started, we did the morning diabetic line ourselves at 5 a.m. And the diabetics, we had maybe 15 people out of the 100, 150. And the diabetics, I have to say, are the most compliant of all because they have so many things that, manifest themselves, neuropathy especially, and ulcers and things from their diabetes, and also weight gain. Well, we got along fine doing that for 10 years. But then the state came in and decided, they even changed our shifts. We had to come in an hour earlier than the guards. So I was working 11 to 7. Then it was 10 to 6. So they changed the diabetic line. And so Don and I never did it again. Well, by the time I left, from the first 15 we'd had in 2006 to 2018, 17, we probably had about 350 diabetics. And a lot of them came 4 times a day. They took their insulin and stuff, but they were just ate whatever they want. And prison food is so awful. It's just nothing but greasy carbs. It's just awful.
So what would they come in for? To get more medicine because they didn't eat right or have?
Oh yeah, they just thought they could eat and just take insulin and it'd be okay. But we ended up having a lot that went out. Of course, we couldn't really doctor them there other than just flash emergency care. We had to send them to Culbertson first. Culbertson hated us. Rushville hated us. They wanted that facility really bad. They gave them a great big grant, water free for like 5 years and stuff, but it got so expensive and they never got reimbursed. And Culbertson ER did not want those prisoners there. Of course, every prisoner is escorted one-on-one when they go to a hospital. Even in surgery, a guard has to go in with them. But then we started taking them down to St. John's and Memorial in Springfield for most of their stuff, like the bigger cares, the Mercy or long-term stuff like that, until we got our own dialysis unit. They just, we racked up millions of dollars of debt. It was so bad sometimes. And then also on third shift, you do the writs, court writs for if they came from Chicago area, they'd have to leave at 3 a.m. to get there by 7 to go to the see the judge or whatever. So we'd have to give them their medicine, their insulin, but you couldn't give them anything for the rest of the day. They had to get by on what they got at 3 a.m. because they abused it so bad. They had a chase car and a van with about 6 people in it, and they strap them down with what they call belly chains, and then onto a black box where they have to, if they're really aggressive, they put their handcuffed and chained wrists into a black box, which like clamps down on them. And then they have another chain going to the floor. It always reminded me of a slave ship, those vans. So a lot of them refused their writs until they just had to go or something. And we had scanners to see them coming and going if they were trying to hide anything on their body. We owed the state the state owed the facilities we went to so much money that a couple of times when they get coming back from those writs, the guards would call and say, our credit cards for gas won't go through. They're being denied. So they'd have to call and get the warden to okay the money for the gas because, we were broke. And then also we owed Moreland and Divot a ton of money. And they'd have to stop for a while. We couldn't get any like IV meds or nothing from them.
Was that because of the change in management? I know all my years of social work, I never worked in a medical setting or a prison setting. And that is just so interesting to me because I don't know, it sounds terribly inhumane.
Well, they actually had a really good life when they got there. They just, they could do what they wanted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, other than coming and going, of course.
They had to stay
in their own units, and unless they had group or something. But groups were usually held like in small rooms right outside the door of the main units. And then they built on what they called, we had to echo, which was A, B, C, D, E. And then they built on a gamma unit, which was really huge, but it was so far away from the rest of the facility that if we had codes on third shift, I was so tired by the time I had run to gamma that I could hardly do it. So again, the state came in and said, well, this isn't efficient, so they made a med room down there so we could like start our AED cards and crash cards from gamma itself, but we still had to run from the healthcare place. The infirmary was right in the middle of the whole facility, but it's laid out like the rays of a sun, each unit. And then they have two great big huge courtyards that are open air. Each 3 units had a gym where they only on first shift though, and they had to be like the psychiatrist had to okay it that they could do physical exercise and not act out, because they had a lot of people trying to hide. And
I was going to ask you, was there violence, or was it a violent
there
place?
was only one time a guy that had been in Chester, which Chester I think is just probably the most horrible facility in Illinois. They're locked up 23 hours a day and only get 1 hour out. They're very decompensated, and we did take a few people from there, maybe 5 over the 12 years I worked there. But the one guy, I don't even know if he's still living. He was a diabetic, so Dawn and I again saw him quite a bit during the evening hours. He was always good to us. We didn't ever try to belittle people, you just have to put that stuff out of their mind, what they did. Exactly. Because some of it was so horrendous, that you just didn't want to know about it. And just treat them for what we could as nurses. And he respected us and we respected him. He was in the special management unit for almost 3 years before they let him out to a regular unit where he could have more privileges. They just kept him locked up all the time too, except for Medline and meals. The guard we had, he could not be nice. He taunted him a lot outside of his cell. Well, for some reason, I don't know why, because you always had to get a captain or above to roll a door at night, even for medical emergencies. Now,
what does roll a door mean?
Well, actually open the big steel door, slide it back. But you also had to roll the door to get into each unit. There were several doors, like between our infirmary, central control, then each of the units, and then each of the main units. So we probably from infirmary down to where he was at, we had 6 doors they had to roll. Well, you had to get a captain or above at night to authorize that. And this guard, but he was taunting him all day, locked up in his cell. And he had a history of violence against guards and nurses and staff and other people. And anyway, he told that to come out and fight him out in the living room. And so he got the guard that was in the bubble to roll the door without asking permission. We saw it later on camera. He just popped out of there like I don't know what you would call it, but he just landed right on top of that guard, come out of there just flying, and just popped out of there and landed right on top of him and beat the holy crap out of that guard. Broke his jaw, broke his shoulder, broke an arm. And of course, the captain, they're always up front at night in entry, which is also separated from the main building. You have to walk through open air yard to get to the main building from entry. Well, they had a horrible time getting the doors rolled because all this was going on. And from the staff that was supposed to be our people that went in like SWAT team type, at night, which we only had maybe 2 or 3 people that were skilled in that, to get down and pull that off of that guard. But he ended up suing the facility, the guard did. Which, I think it should have been the guard in the bubble that got in the trouble for rolling that door. So we actually, as healthcare nurses, by the time we got down there for the code, it was only him that we could treat. Well, we weren't allowed to treat the guards because it's the two different unions. It just don't make no sense, some of the stuff they do. Anyway, they sent him to Springfield. I think he was in the hospital like 2 or 3 months. He ended up moving to Springfield, but after he got his lawsuit, and he got several $1 million, I think, from the state for that, back to work, which nobody could believe it. And his attitude was even worse than when he got in trouble. What happened that really made him leave, what they fired him for, was he was late getting to shift that night, and he was driving like 100 miles an hour from Springfield all the way to Rushville, and the state police were trying to pull him over, and they followed him all the way to the facility, and he ran in the facility and hid. And then the state cops just said, hey, we'll just wait till morning. You'll finally get tired. Then we'll come in and get you. And they did. And so they ended up having a reason to fire him then. But it's like he couldn't get the concept. Why did he want to be a guard when he had no, I wouldn't say compassion, but he had no manners.
Sometimes it seems like people that have that kind of personality kind of gravitate towards a profession where they can be mean to other people, which it seems like, oh my God, you wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
They do.
In like some rural jails, maybe, they get away with it, or even in Department of Corrections places that are bigger, like Mount Sterling and Galesburg at Canton. They have populations of 3,500 people,
Yeah.
There's always something going on all 3 shifts. I looked in that one in Galesburg because Wexford had it, and also Canton and Mount Sterling. They have to take their carts outside, snow, sleet, or rain, and wheel them over to all the housing units because they're so separated by this great big humongous courtyard. It's kind of a nightmare.
Is it a legal requirement that there have to be so many medical personnel there? Like, was it required that there be so many nurses on shift?
No. We had just one for each unit, but at night it was just me and Dawn, and we were both RNs, so we split our weekends, of course. So every other weekend we had the weekend off, and if we worked the weekend, then we had Monday, Fridays off. But on those days, we had an LPN with us.
Did you have social workers on staff? I know you said there were
all the time on first and second. That was another thing about Methodist, on where I worked in community behavioral health. We had a whole slew of social workers. I think they were in the social work field, but they were the ones that, when they were getting ready to get out, would house them, make sure they had facilities to go to,
charge planning type stuff.
Yeah. And so they were all right there in the nurses station too on first shift, and they were very good with the residents that we had at Methodist. I was always very impressed with the way they laid that out. There was also 7th floor was the outpatient clinic for the daytime hours. They had a psychiatrist there from like 7 to 11 at night, but only Monday through Friday. So people could come in that were a little better behaved and more in tune with their medicine, and their treatments. They could come in and just get outpatient medicine refilled and things, which that was nice for them.
You working in behavioral health and then a prison.
Yes.
How would you compare the two, as far as what I'm thinking of is from a social work perspective, as far as being humane and having compassion, like you were talking about?
Well, Methodist was 10 times difference better than the prison.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the nurses have compassion for them in a way, as long as they're compliant. But when they start not taking their meds and acting out and getting entitled, then we lose it pretty fast.
Yeah. But not so in a behavioral health. If they were non-compliant there, you didn't have the same kind of feeling?
Because it's a lot more one-on-one. Like in my unit, 25 people was the most patient we could take. they had strict rules, and we added rules as we went along. We had a lady from Littleton that used to try to run out in traffic and kill herself, but she was the happiest camper you would ever want. That woman just had the most brilliant, happy vibe going on all the time. Her husband loved her. She had two probably junior high age kids then. They just could not stop her trying to kill herself in different ways.
Was she hearing voices or something?
I think she was what they called schizoaffective. Yes. Yeah. She had delusions that told her, but at the same time, she was always happy about it. She never was depressed about it. And
That's
she was
so
compliant with everything, but we had whole lists just for her. At Methodist too, you could always check on our computers at night who was coming through the ER. So if they had a P beside them, we knew it was psych. And every time we saw her name, there was things we had to go through, like we had to take the batteries out of the remote in the common rooms because she'd try swallowing batteries. If she was in the kitchen, you couldn't let her in. They used to give them little half cans of pop, but we had to take off the top for them, and throw it away. Well, we couldn't let her in there. She tried getting a light bulb out and eating it one time out of the refrigerator, just as fast as you could believe, One time on our shift, we always had a tech too that went around and checked them every single 15 minutes and had a clipboard that he checked them off, made sure they were sleeping or at least calm in their rooms at night. And the nurse's station was kind of way behind there, but the corridor was dark at night. She was at the exit sign for the old unit back there. And somehow she had got one of those milk crates and a bottle of Pepsi. And she was standing on that milk crate, putting her finger up in the exit sign, trying to pour the Pepsi down there and electrocute herself. We went back there and turned on the lights, and I said, I can't remember her name now, but I said, say Frances. I said, Frances, what are you doing? Nothing. I'm okay. Just kept on doing it, And I said, you have to get that off that milk crate, Frances. She just laughed and carry on.
Wow.
But they ended up, which was really sad. They ended up making her husband divorce her so he could take custody of the two kids completely. Otherwise, they were going to take the kids out of the home. And they both loved her. And the husband loved her, and then kind of weird, before I'd ever even met Dawn Sullivan, she had worked at Lewiston at the old Claritona nursing home and had this lady as an outpatient. And she got away from him once on first shift and ran over to County Market and was trying to swallow a whole thing of bleach. And the nurses had to go running across the highway at the County Market to get her. So she was a handful, and I never
bet
happened to him, but I really enjoyed psych up there a lot. It's just, and I had stayed there. I'd still be there probably, except for that drive. I've always lived here. Bob and I built this house right next to Mother and Daddy, where I was raised and grew up, and I still own that house, Mother and Daddy's house, this house, and the farmhouse down the road where my youngest grandson lives. And I like the change of seasons. I like being in the country where I have no neighbors. I can't stand neighbors.
We're just small town people.
Yes.
And
I still have a ton of friends that I had, growing up. Lynn Abernathy and Edie Abernathy, best friends since kindergarten. I still see them girls all the time. Jim Cassidy is also my cousin. He's just 3 miles away from me. And Jim Abernathy. I still see him and Arlene a lot. I just love being able to connect with everybody I grew up with that are still around here. But yeah, we got sued a lot. The nurses did.
Wow.
And the doctors, especially the dentist.
What does civilly committed mean?
Supposedly that they don't have to adhere, that their criminal proceedings are either done or held in limbo or something, and they're supposed to get this treatment. But again, since it's civil commitment, they don't have to against their will. The other
Because
thing
they need more than prison. They need treatment.
right,
Is
because
that
they
it?
didn't, they're sexual predators and they didn't get any kind of treatment for it when they were in the Department of Corrections
Huh.
itself.
Wonder why that is. Wonder why they didn't try. Well, I
I
guess they
don't
don't
think they
do
even
treatment.
thought about it really until probably the 1990s, 2000s. You know, people
Yeah,
started suing for this or that or the other, and they thought, well, we'll just, try this.
things definitely change. And
Yes.
even in the field of social work, I've done substance use counseling, and it's done so different now than it was when I started in 85 or 87. It just, things change.
Yeah.
Things change. We get smarter? I'm not sure.
Well, I believe they deserved what they, deserve a chance to at least go through the treatment. And the psychiatrists will tell you all the time, there's no way you can stop them having these feelings, but they can learn to self-control, learn to know their triggers,
Yes.
and
Yes.
with their skills that they learn in group, through medicine, whatever combination, I think is the best of group and meds for each person individually. They have to be individualized. It can't just say, oh, you're a schizophrenic or you're borderline personality disorder and give them all the same thing. It doesn't work that way.
No, no.
But and I know that from Brandon. I mean, when they came out with Risperidol Consta, which is an injectable psychiatric medicine, and I've been out of it long enough not to forget the actual classification of it. But I do know this: they used to give the old Thorazine when they first started giving injectables, which had a ton of side effects. Tardive dyskinesia being the number one, where they spit, develop Tourette syndrome, talk to themselves, have facial tics, ataxic gait, where they stumble. They always called it the Thorazine shuffle because they get
that in nursing homes too. When I worked in a
yes.
nursing home.
So they've largely got away from that. And also those first injectables for the first 40 years were oil based. They thought that would last longer in the fatty deposits in like the thighs, the stomach, whatever of your body. Well, Risperidol Consta was brand new when Brandon first got diagnosed with schizophrenia and ended up in Zeller's, and it's water based. So it said it had better efficacy because it would disperse completely through the body instead of stay in that oily deposit just in that fat area.
Yes.
So it was more controlled over a 3-month period instead of having bursts of control. And he did really well. Within 6 weeks after he started on that, he was back to his old self just fine. But as I kept telling my mother when she was alive, it doesn't last forever, mother. And 2 to 3 years seemed to be like the stopping point. They'd have to adjust it, add something, take something away. Also, since he was a vet, that's another thing I learned at Methodist. If they have VA insurance, they kick them out of the regular places and make them go to the VA because of that insurance.
Yes.
And the VA at that time was not equipped to handle all these mentally ill people.
And I'm not sure. I have students that are associated with the VA lots of times, and I don't think they have a great reputation even now.
No.
And that's pretty sad, huh? People go serve the country and then they can't get adequate health care. If you could talk to social workers who are young social workers who are interested in medical social work, either not nursing, but medical social work, what advice would you give them about going into that field? What's something they need to know?
I think it's badly needed, and it'll be hard and frustrating, and you'll hate it a lot of times because of the way the system is set up. But if you just keep persevering, I think you will get the rewards of your lifetime, and it's badly needed.